Australia. A land of stark, breathtaking beauty. From the sun-baked red outback to the vibrant coastal cities, it's a country known for its rugged landscapes and resilient spirit. But this is also an ancient land, with a dark and brutal colonial history. A past written in the blood of convicts, bushrangers, and gold rush pioneers. A history of harsh penal colonies, lonely deaths in the bush, and fortunes won and lost in a single day. And in this land of extremes, the past does not rest quietly. Tonight, we venture into the sun-scorched heart of the Southern Hemisphere. We are counting down the top 10 most haunted places in Australia, where the ghosts of a harsh frontier still walk in the shadow of modern cities. But be warned. The spirits you will meet here are as tough and unforgiving as the land itself. Their stories are etched in suffering, and their presence is a cold chill in the relentless Australian heat. 1. Port Arthur, Tasmania. A picturesque, ruins-dotted cove that was once the most feared penal settlement in the British Empire, a place designed to crush the human spirit, and where the echoes of that torment have never faded. The history is one of systematic brutality. From 1833 to the 1850s, Port Arthur was a prison for the most hardened re-offenders from the British colonies. Men were subjected to silent confinement, relentless labor, and lashings. The suffering was immense, and the site was also the location of the tragic 1996 mass shooting, adding a new, modern layer of grief to the ancient stones. The paranormal encounter is a cacophony of despair. Visitors report hearing phantom footsteps, the clanking of chains, and desperate, whispered pleas from empty cells. The apparition of a young boy, killed during the construction of the church, is often seen crying. But the most common report is of a cold, heavy hand grabbing shoulders or a feeling of being violently shoved by an unseen force. The climactic story comes from a tour guide. Leading a night tour through the separate prison, a facility designed for sensory deprivation, he saw the clear figure of a man in convict rags, his face hollow with despair, standing at the end of a corridor. The figure raised a bony finger, pointed directly at the guide, and let out a silent, open-mouthed scream that seemed to suck all the sound from the air before he vanished. The entire tour group felt an overwhelming wave of nausea and dread. Port Arthur is not just a historic site, it is a pressure cooker of human misery, and the lid has never been sealed shut. 2. The Monte Cristo Homestead, Junee. A grand, Victorian mansion in the New South Wales countryside, often called Australia's most haunted house, where the cruel legacy of its original owners has stained the property with violence and sorrow. The history is a domestic nightmare. The Crawley family, who built the home in 1885, were known for their harshness. A stable boy was allegedly beaten to death for accidentally dropping a valued ornament. A maid fell, or was pushed, from the balcony to her death. A young child died after being dropped on the staircase. The matriarch, Elizabeth Crawley, rarely left the house after her husband's death, living in mourning for over 50 years. The paranormal encounter is relentless and varied. Apparitions of Mrs. Crawley are seen peering from the upstairs windows. The ghost of the murdered stable boy is felt in the coach house, where visitors report being scratched. The sound of a crying baby echoes through the halls, and the smell of cooking from the empty kitchen is common. Objects move on their own, and an oppressive feeling of being watched is constant. The climactic story involves a photographer. He captured an image of the balcony where the maid died. When the photo was developed, It clearly showed the translucent figure of a young woman in a servant's uniform, her arms outstretched as if falling. But the most chilling detail was her face, frozen in a look of sheer terror, not at the ground below, but at something, or someone, on the balcony with her. The Monte Cristo Homestead is a beautiful prison, where the ghosts of the past are as trapped now as they were in life. 3. The Adelaide Arcade, Adelaide. A beautiful, Victorian-era shopping arcade, bustling with life and commerce by day, but when the gates are locked, the original caretaker, who was electrocuted in a tragic accident, still makes his nightly rounds. The history is a simple, gruesome accident. In 1887, just months after the arcade opened, caretaker Francis Clooney was checking the building's primitive electrical generator when he slipped on the wet floor and touched a live terminal, electrocuting himself. His body was discovered by his young apprentice. The paranormal encounter is one of dedicated routine. Shopkeepers arriving in the morning find items rearranged, lights turned on, and the faint smell of cigar smoke, Clooney's favorite, lingering in the air. His full-bodied apparition, a bearded man in period clothing, is often seen walking the balconies, checking doors. Many have reported feeling a cold spot or a gentle, guiding push on the stairs, as if someone is ensuring they don't trip. The climactic story is from a security guard. Reviewing footage from a closed-circuit camera, he saw a man in 19th-century clothing walking through a solid, locked glass door. The figure then proceeded to check the handle of every shopfront, just as a caretaker would. When he reached the spot where Clooney died, he stopped, turned, and looked directly into the camera with a sad expression before fading away. The guard quit the next day. The Adelaide Arcade is a place where a man's sense of duty was so strong, it kept him on the job for over a century after his death. 4. The North Kapunda Hotel, South Australia. A historic pub in a former copper mining town, known as one of the most paranormally active pubs in the country, where the ghost of a former publican, who hanged himself in the cellar, is far from resting in peace. The history is one of financial ruin and despair. In the 19th century, publican Thomas "Tommy" Wilson was deep in debt. After a final, desperate night of drinking, he went down to the cellar and took his own life. The tough, mining town energy of Kapunda, with its own history of violence and sudden death, seems to have amplified the haunting. The paranormal encounter is aggressive and personal. The spirit, known as the Spirit of Tea, is known for physical attacks. Patrons and staff report being slapped, punched, and having their hair pulled. Glasses shatter for no reason. The cellar, where Tommy died, is a vortex of negative energy where people feel sick, dizzy, and overwhelmed with feelings of hopelessness. The climactic story was captured by a paranormal investigation team. They were in the cellar, attempting to communicate, when a heavy wooden chair levitated several feet into the air and was thrown across the room, smashing against the wall. On their audio recorder, they captured a deep, guttural voice growling, "Get out of my pub." When they reviewed their thermal camera, a cold, human-shaped mass was visible in the corner of the room at the exact moment the chair flew. The North Kapunda Hotel is a classic Aussie pub where the beer is cold, the stories are tall, and one of the regulars has been dead for over 100 years. 5. The Fremantle Arts Centre, Western Australia. A stunning, Gothic-style building that now hosts art exhibitions and concerts, but its beautiful facade hides a grim past as a lunatic asylum and a women's prison, where the cries of the forgotten still resonate within its thick stone walls. The history is a chronicle of misery. Built in the 1860s, it served as a lunatic asylum where patients were kept in horrific conditions. It was later a women's prison. The suffering within these walls was so profound that it seems to have been absorbed by the very limestone from which it was built. The paranormal encounter is one of deep, residual sadness. Visitors and staff report hearing the sound of phantom screaming and crying, particularly in the basement areas. The apparition of a woman in a grey, tattered dress, known as the Lady in Grey, is often seen wandering the halls, her face etched with madness and grief. Many feel sudden, irrational bursts of fear and panic, as if experiencing the final moments of a long-dead inmate. The climactic story involves a night security guard. He was making his rounds when he heard the sound of a child giggling from a locked exhibition room. He unlocked the door and shone his torch inside. The giggling stopped, and in the beam of his light, he saw the small, clear handprints of a child appear one by one in the dust on the floor, as if someone invisible was playing a game, before they simply stopped. The room was empty. The Fremantle Art Centre is a place where art now tries to cover the scars of the past, but the pain underneath is still very much alive. 6. The Q Station, Sydney, New South Wales. A peaceful, scenic retreat on Sydney Harbour at North Head that was once the terrifying quarantine station, a place of isolation and death for thousands of immigrants and sailors arriving with contagious diseases. The history is one of fear and isolation. From 1832 to 1984, ships carrying smallpox, typhoid, and the Spanish flu were forced to dock here. Passengers were stripped, washed in carbolic acid, and confined, often watching their loved ones die in the nearby hospital. Many were buried in unmarked graves. The despair of being so close to a new life, yet trapped in a living hell, is palpable. The paranormal encounter is intense and well documented. The shower block, where people were forcibly scrubbed, is a hotbed of activity, with reports of phantom hands touching visitors. Apparitions of figures in period clothing are seen wandering the paths. The morgue is considered one of the most active areas, with the sound of dragging bodies and the smell of disinfectant and decay. The climactic story is from a former tour guide. While alone in the hospital shower block, his walkie-talkie crackled to life with the sound of a man sobbing and screaming, "I'm clean! Let me out!" The voice was hysterical, pleading. He radioed for backup, but when other guides arrived, the block was silent. Later, a psychic on a tour, unaware of the story, stopped in the exact same spot and described a man named Arthur who was screaming that he was clean, right before he died of typhus. The Q Station is a beautiful cage, where the ghosts of hopeful newcomers are forever waiting for a release that never came. 7. The Beechworth Asylum, Victoria. A massive, sprawling complex of bluestone buildings, known as Mayday Hills, a place where over 9,000 patients lived and died, many subjected to the brutal psychiatric treatments of the 19th and 20th centuries. The history is a textbook case of archaic, often cruel, mental health care. Treatments included electroshock therapy, insulin comas, and frontal lobotomies. Patients were often institutionalized for life for conditions like postpartum depression or epilepsy. The weight of so much confusion, fear, and medical trauma has left a permanent stain. The paranormal encounter is a symphony of lost minds. Visitors report hearing disembodied screaming, crying, and maniacal laughter echoing through the tunnels that connect the buildings. Shadow figures dart through the wards. The most common report is of a female spirit, a former patient, who tugs at clothing and whispers incoherently in people's ears, desperate to tell her story. The climactic story comes from an urban explorer. He was in the surgical wing when his camera flash illuminated a figure standing at the end of a hallway, a tall man in an orderly's uniform, holding what looked like a large syringe. The explorer fled, but as he ran, he heard the sound of heavy, running footsteps gaining on him, and felt a cold, sharp prick in his back. When he reached safety, there was a small, red puncture mark on his shoulder, bleeding slightly. The Beechworth Asylum is a monument to a time when the mind was a terrifying frontier, and the treatments were often worse than the diseases. 8. The Devil's Pool, Babinda, Queensland. A beautiful, tranquil swimming hole in a tropical rainforest that holds a deadly secret and a tragic Aboriginal legend. This is a place where young men have mysteriously drowned for decades, pulled under by a grieving spirit. The history is an ancient Dreamtime story. A young woman named Ilana, from the Yidinji people, was married to a respected elder. She fell in love with a handsome stranger named Daiga. When their tribe separated them, a heartbroken Ilana threw herself into the water, her sorrow so powerful it twisted the rocks and created the Devil's Pool. Now, her spirit is said to linger, luring young men to their deaths to be with her forever. The paranormal encounter is one of eerie beauty and sudden danger. Locals report seeing the apparition of a beautiful Aboriginal woman weeping by the water's edge. Some have heard a woman's voice calling their name from the pool. But the most compelling evidence is the grim statistic: over 17 young men have died there in mysterious circumstances, often strong swimmers who were suddenly pulled under by an unseen force. The climactic story is a recent, tragic account. In 2008, a young man on his honeymoon was swimming in the pool. Witnesses said he was in calm, shallow water when he suddenly screamed, "She's got me," and was dragged under in a powerful current that shouldn't have existed. His body was found days later, trapped between rocks in a way that defied the natural flow of the water. The Devil's Pool is a stunningly beautiful death trap, a place where a legend is tragically, and repeatedly, proven true. 9. The Old Melbourne Gaol, Victoria. A cold, bluestone prison in the heart of the city, where some of Australia's most infamous criminals were held and executed, and where the ghost of its most famous inmate, bushranger Ned Kelly, is said to still clank his chains. The history is one of capital punishment and harsh justice. 133 people were hanged within these walls, including the legendary Ned Kelly in 1880. The gaol was a place of fear, where prisoners spent their final moments in solitary, condemned cells before walking to the gallows. The paranormal encounter is aggressive and chilling. Visitors report feeling nauseous and dizzy in the condemned cells, especially cell 17. The sound of heavy, dragging chains is common. But the most frequent reports are of being touched, pushed, or choked by an unseen presence. The spirit of a vicious warder, known as the Black Strangler, is blamed for many of the physical attacks. The climactic story is from a tour guide. During a night tour, she was telling the story of Ned Kelly's execution in the hanging yard. As she finished, the distinct smell of old leather and gunpowder, the smell of a bushranger, filled the air. A man on the tour, standing at the back, felt an iron-hard grip on his arm. He looked down and saw the clear impression of a large, calloused hand on his bicep. When he looked up, he saw the fleeting image of a tall, bearded man in a long coat, who tipped an imaginary hat and vanished. Old Melbourne Gaol is a cold, hard monument to justice, where the anger of the condemned still simmers within the stone. 10. The Princess Theatre, Melbourne. A breathtakingly opulent theatre, a palace of dreams and fantasy, but it has a permanent and beloved resident ghost. This is the story of Federici, the opera singer who never took his final bow. The history is a dramatic, on-stage tragedy. In 1888, during a performance of the opera Faust, baritone Federici, stage name for Frederick Baker, was playing the demon Mephistopheles. In the final scene, his character must descend through a trapdoor to hell. As he did so, Federici suffered a massive heart attack and died backstage. The audience, thinking it was part of the act, gave him a thunderous ovation. The paranormal encounter is one of the most benign and consistent in the world. Federici is not a malevolent spirit, he is a dedicated performer. His apparition, in full Mephistopheles costume, is seen watching performances from the dress circle, Box 1. Actors report their props being moved, and lights flickering. Many feel a comforting, paternal presence, and it's considered good luck for a production if Federici makes an appearance. The climactic story is why he is number one. During a modern revival of Faust, the actor playing Mephistopheles felt an unusual sense of calm during his final descent. As the trapdoor closed, he saw the clear apparition of Federici standing in the wings, giving him a slow, approving nod. The actor later said it felt less like being haunted, and more like being coached by a master. A single, long-stemmed red rose, Federici's signature, was found on the stage the next morning, with no explanation. The Princess Theatre shows that not all ghosts are to be feared. Some simply love the stage so much, they refuse to leave it, even in death. You have now journeyed from the brutal penal colonies of Tasmania to the tragic swimming holes of Queensland. You have met ghosts of convicts and bushrangers, of heartbroken women and dedicated performers. You have seen that Australia's history is not just one of sun and surf, but of sun-bleached bones and surf-pounded shipwrecks. So we have to ask you, after hearing these 10 tales from the land down under, would you dare to spend a night in the Monte Cristo Homestead, or take a solitary swim in the Devil's Pool? Or would you prefer a seat at the Princess Theatre, hoping for a glimpse of a friendly ghost? Let us know in the comments which of these Australian hauntings captured your imagination and your fear. If these stories sent a chill through the outback heat, do us a favor, give this video a thumbs up and share it with a mate who loves a good scare. And to make sure you never miss another journey into the shadows, subscribe to Ghostly Tales, and hit that notification bell. Because in a land this old and this vast, the stories are waiting just beyond the firelight. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.